us. It's good to see you. Oh, yes. Looks like some of us are in the fresh outdoors like me, right? You see, we're still kind of experimenting with some of our backdrops that we can have. And I know you can even bring in your own photos for that. So I think we're trying to bring in the human side a bit, to these online interactions. And I like to see that when it's appropriate. I think this is one of those times for sure. Okay, we've got a phone number coming in. Patrick, I'm just mentioning that to you. I'm going to ask this person to make sure their name is visible for us in our interaction today. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have a few comments at the beginning before we turn it over to Heather, our virtual leader in residence, or leader in virtual residence, whichever way you like to think about it. Just glad we can be together. And again, I'm Dr. Elisha Raminsky. I'm coordinator of the Leadership Studies minor at Frostburg State University. I also coordinate the Communication Leadership Lab. The lab is a framework for discussions like this. So we actually often kind of work to integrate, what we're doing in our Leadership Studies minor and in our Communication Studies program, which is the department program that I'm embedded within, to work together to, in some way, bring students into experiences to be better communication practitioners, to connect campus and community, and to bring them together to think about how they can get to know each other better, how they can help to support problem solving and decision making in campus and community together. And in general, just to consider what's essential in these times in terms of dialogue and deliberation. And so there is a lot of work being done in those fields. It's very hands-on, and we try to give people, all around our region here and beyond that, as we invite people from the, across the state and around the world today. So again, welcome.
I think your microphone is on mute, Dr. Raminsky.
Okay, thank you. Not sure how that happened. Was that just that last end? That last part I said?
Yep, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that's good. Just let me know if you need, I need help along the way here. But I wanted to say that Heather's presentation today about cultivating soulful, resilient leadership for social change is now more than ever essential. I know that a lot of what we're trying to navigate is trying to figure out how to use technologies or how to make sure we stay connected. But we do need to make sure we stay focused on the future, which is a leadership consideration, right? And so we'll learn from Heather today and from each other, I think, because she'll present for a bit and lead some interaction. So soon she'll be taking it away. But I think that, we need to enter in thinking that we're all part of this, we're all together, we're all trying to solve some problems together. Our leadership is needed. We are looking at a time when we have some major cracks being revealed in the world around us, and especially in our local communities, it hits home. So we want to think about how we can use this practically, after the experience too. I want to thank our students in the Communication Leadership Lab. We refer to them as lab assistants. So London Watkins and Richard White, Caprice and Fatu are also here, right, to help us today. We also have our Introduction to Leadership Studies class that's involved in today's session. This is their class time, so I'm glad that they're here, who was able to make it. We also know not everyone can make it, so I do want to note that. Some people are still having some challenges with technology or access, and so we recognize that, and we'll take this message out to them after the session. And I want to thank Women's Studies. Dr. Jennifer Earls has been a supporter of this event, along with Patrick O'Brien, who I've been working on some other events with recently and learned a lot through his efforts. He's the director of our Office of Civic Engagement, and Bill Mandicott, who will speak in just a bit to do another welcome to bring us together. Mr. Bill is one of the people who hired me, and so I appreciate his mentorship and friendship and collegiality through the years. He's one of those people that is a rare intersection of a servant leader in Greenleaf's sense and a subversive change agent. So I'll just leave that with you, and you can think about that. But I appreciate that all these partners have come together, and we have some support from the FSU Foundation as well. Our Women's Action Coalition in Allegheny County and Choose Civility chapter have also been community partners, and inviting people and getting people here, helping set the event up on Facebook and that type of thing. So I want to acknowledge them. So just quickly before I turn it to Bill, before we turn it to London, who will introduce Heather, I just wanted to say that we are taking some precautions for security to, staying mute, having your name up fully, making sure we're watching who we're admitting in through the waiting room, locking the meeting in just a bit, limiting screen sharing and kind of monitoring our chat will be part of that process that we've prepared for. I would also say that, just take turns like you would in a normal conversation as best as you can. We know it's a little awkward, but please be involved, in the discussion when we turn to that. Heather will, I'm sure, take questions along the way, but I would say we'll have plenty of time at the end of her presentation for discussion and interacting a bit. So that's kind of the way that we'll proceed. And, if there are any disruptions or issues, we'll handle it together. We'll figure it out as we go. So let me see if there's anything else I need to say here. We will take hands, you can put your hand up on here if you kind of look around at your settings a bit on Zoom, and we can watch that and use that, but we'll also watch chat, and just jump in too, and we'll work to facilitate the discussion if there's anyone overlapping when they're trying to get involved. So let me turn it over to Mr. Bill Mandicott, who's going to say a few words before we get started.
Thank you, Alicia. I did want to say that on behalf of all of my colleagues that are crossing the boundaries between academic and student affairs, to all our students out there and community members, let me add my welcome to today's annual leadership residency. Our university is really committed to promoting an environment that explores leadership education, development, scholarship, and civic education and civic engagement. So today's program is no exception. I'm so pleased that Heather is back with us again on campus. She was here a few years ago. So while we would have preferred to host this in-person event, I think that, we made a decision. We switched gears to the virtual world of engagement rather than giving up or giving in. So today's focus on resilient leadership is really quite timely. So we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Prepared to be inspired by Heather. And remember, we're all just turtles right now. So welcome.
I like that. I feel like a turtle in the brush here. See it behind me. So thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to turn it over to London next, one of our lab assistants, to talk a little bit about how our discussion will work and to introduce Heather.
Hello, everyone. My name is London, and I'm just going to say a couple notes on how the discussion will work today and also introduce Heather Mizeur. But the first couple of notes will be to first make sure that we follow the civility principles for this event when going about our discussion. We'll make sure to ask participants to introduce themselves by their name and organization, and also just keep in mind the civility principles that we have on the screen right now. Going forward to introduce Heather Mizeur. Heather Mizeur is the CEO and founder of Soulful Politics, a nonprofit organization that envisions how the world would be different if politics were rooted in radical love. Mizeur teaches heart-centered mindfulness and resilient leadership to strengthen democracy and soften political divides. Soulful Politics is dedicated to the cultivation, empowerment, and alignment of inner wisdom and external engagement as a catalyst for individual and community transformation. Strong leaders emerge from their interactions with inspirational and motivational public lectures, workshops, blog posts, podcasts, and retreats that Mizeur offers. Soulful Politics creates engaging interactions that connects its readers, listeners, and supporters to a new level of consciousness about the intersection of policy advocacy, spirituality, social justice, and community relationships. Our actions should be guided by our soul forces for good in the world. Miss Mizeur spent the first half of her career directly engaged in politics in every level. After a successful career as a healthcare policy analyst in Congress, a Maryland state manager of a U.S. presidential campaign, and a stint on her local city council, Mizeur was elected to serve 2 four-year terms as a Democratic member of the House of Delegates in the Maryland General Assembly between 2007 and 2015. Her time in the legislature was marked with rewarding victories on a range of progressive issues that she put her whole heart into advancing. Mizeur sponsored and worked with colleagues to pass laws expanding health insurance, preventing fracking, abolishing the death penalty, and creating equal justice through marriage equality for LGBT families, to name a few. She was also a Democratic candidate for governor of Maryland in 2014 and became one of the, sorry, my screen just went off, and became one of the state's most recognized voices promoting progressive change. I will now introduce formally Ms. Heather Mizeur.
Thank you so much, London. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
All right, so I'm able to share my screen, is that right? Okay. Pull this up.
Just let me know if you need any help. I think we got you set up.
All good now? Everyone can see?
Yep, it should be viewable by everyone.
Okay, great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be back on campus, so to speak. My heart really never leaves Western Maryland, even though I'm on the Eastern Shore. The time that I was in the General Assembly, I had an opportunity to connect with many people throughout the Western Maryland counties on our work on fracking, some of whom I've noticed are on the webinar today. And some of the students I think I've recognized from previous engagement on campus with Soulful Politics. And I welcome all the new voices and faces who are joining us here today for a conversation about cultivating soulful, resilient leadership for social change. I want to give a little bit of a background on where the idea for Soulful Politics came from. It has its roots in both Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and with Gandhi. In his famous I Have a Dream speech in 1963 from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Dr. King included in that speech this quote: "We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to denigrate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force." Dr. Martin Luther King was also a student of Gandhi's, who really is credited with coining the term soul force. Known the world over for his successful use of nonviolent resistance to create social change, Gandhi coined the term satyagraha. It's a Sanskrit word that means truth, while agra means insistence. So you put satya and agra together for satyagraha. Truth's insistence also got translated as soul force. Think about that. Our soul force is about the insistence for truth in the world. Gandhi said, satyagraha, or soul force, is the weapon of the strong. It admits of no violence under any circumstances whatsoever, and it insists upon truth. Its foundation is empathy and compassion. The satyagrahi's object is to convert, not coerce the wrongdoer. We call ourselves at Soulful Politics a fire starter for mindful social action. We raise awareness of how to incorporate the inner wisdom that is inside of us into our external civic actions to create the change that we wish to see in the world. We nurture connections to this notion of the other. Really, there is no other. There's no us and them. There's only one. And we're going to explore how that's so in today's conversation. Our work is right at that intersectionality of policy advocacy, spirituality, social justice, and community relationships. The community relationships, of course, have been a little bit strained recently under the new world that we find ourselves living in. And I'm not sure about you, but I always can use a little more Baby Yoda in my life. I love this meme. I saw it a little bit on the back end of after it had already gone around because of my time in Peru. But after having completed our 90-day trial of 2020, we're all kind of wondering right now, how do we cancel? Is there a refund policy? But you know, there are opportunities when we spend time going more inward, connecting with our resilience to see the benefits of what the current opportunity is providing for us. We are all more resilient than we know. Our ancestors have walked this path before us, and they leave our imprint within us. This isn't the first pandemic health crisis that the world has faced. As a matter of fact, they kind of seem to happen about every 100 years. So in some ways, we probably should have realized that we were going to be the generation to face another one after the 1918 epidemic. And here we are, somewhat caught off guard because we like to believe that things like this can't and won't happen anymore. But we have a code in our DNA that has been shared with us from generation to generation on how to get through things that are so much more complicated than that which we face right now. We can trust the inner wisdom that's been passed on to us from our ancestors, but to listen to them and to listen to that deep wisdom that is inside of us, we need to silence ourselves to be able to go within and hear their promptings. When more of us find that calm, still point within this storm, we are better able to thrive in the chaos and can even help to shift it. This opens pathways to love ourselves more fully and to mindfully put that love out into the world. That's really what is meant by radical love that Soulful promotes. It's that unconditional love for ourselves, that we love ourselves first, we are able to put that love out into the world. And love being an action, not just a way that we feel about somebody else. Love is so much more powerful than that. It can guide all of our instincts, all of our decisions. And when we put that love out into the world, we create a whole new opportunity to be in community in a new way. That's fundamental to the question of our work here at Soulful Politics. We ask, how would the world be different if politics were rooted in radical love? Well, what's radical love, you might ask? Well, first of all, I want to note that by politics, I'm not just talking about the current sense and definition of politics, elected office and government officials, though for sure I'm talking about that. It's also politics more in the Greek term, the body politic, us coming together as one in community and how we interact with each other. And as I mentioned before, we're going to, and we'll continue to explore in the presentation and conversation today, this notion of radical love, unconditional love, that there's nothing in the world that could make you unworthy of me finding and seeking a connection to you. And I'm seeing now the ways that radical love is the equal and opposite counter to this novel coronavirus. They both force us inside ourselves in isolation. Just as the darkness of the coronavirus spreads from individual to individual and multiplies exponentially throughout the world to create this pandemic health crisis, each one of us can be a host for what I'm calling the love bug. equal in scope and power with the force of light to become a transcendence of higher global consciousness. We live in a world that is based in duality. There's always the same amount of darkness as there is light. Right now in these times, it's easy to see and be concerned about the darkness, the challenge, the anxiety of this moment. But there's just as much light shining towards the opportunity for changing and creating a new us and a new world together. But this work isn't easy. It starts with having to walk through the fire and dis-ease within us and realize our own individual awakening in order to impact a collective shift. It takes radical courage, radical honesty, and radical compassion. And from this, we will see the radical change that comes from rebirth. There was a little bit of a homework assignment for today's webinar in reading an essay that I wrote after coming home from a pretty big journey that I shared. That is, don't worry if you didn't read it, I'm going to go over the highlights of some elements of it. But in this essay, I highlight some wisdom teachings that come from an experience that I'll talk about. And so we're going to unpack this by discussing the opportunities that we have right now for reflection, for renewal, for rebirth, why resilience matters in all of this, and how we're all in it together, what is meant by reciprocity. So this was my retreat hut in the middle of the jungle of Peru, in the Amazon jungle. I went there on February 15th and I came out on March 15th, 30 days in complete and total isolation where I knew nothing of the coronavirus or the new world that I was coming forward to. I should probably step back and say part of the reason why I started doing retreats like this was after I ran for governor, I realized that such a giant external experience, such a giving of my energy in such a big external way, it takes a lot to run around a state of 5 million people that stretches from Ocean City to Oakland. And that kind of effort of always being outside of myself and connecting to everyone else and discussing this external vision of what we wanted to create in the state of Maryland needed to be balanced after that campaign was over. And I decided that I would do just as radical of a move to go inward. That the journey of running for governor was a beautiful external expression of the world that I wanted to create. And I wanted to recenter myself and become even more familiar with just who Heather is after having given so much of myself away to everybody else. So here I find myself in Peru on an annual basis for the last 4 years. My friend's home here has a few extra cabins on her duck pond. And there's nothing like being nestled in the heart of nature with exotic animals singing you to sleep each night to get more familiar with who you are. It also helps when you're basically trapped in an 8x10 room. For the 30 days that I was there, normally I go for 10. I really stepped up my game this time and decided to spend 30 days here. And I didn't leave the room for the entire time I was there. My activities are severely restricted. No electricity, so no cell phone, no emails, no social media, no TV, no lights. I had candles. Barely even read. Anything that was an outside energy source, I kept away and only allowed for a connection to myself. So I did puzzles, yoga, meditation, journaling, did exercising in this tiny little space. You can tell I was doing my laundry in there too. The reason why I share the aesthetic and renunciation side of this practice, because I also was fasting and eating limited amounts of bland food every day, is not so much to say, oh, look what I did, or to suggest that you should do this either. But I always think contrast is a really great teacher. And when I first got back from Peru, after dealing with the shock of there being this coronavirus situation having unfolded, it was clear that a lot of friends and supporters of this work at Soulful were asking for some guidance on how to handle the frustrations and the challenges of going within, of being in quarantine, of being in isolation. And so I'd like to walk you through a little bit of that. One of my favorite teachers is Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, and this is what she has to say about developing a rich inner life. It deepens the root of integrity. It fortifies the heart of courage. It sharpens the eye of vision. It strengthens the will to serve and firms the resolve to sacrifice. Now, in the reflection section of the work, I call it Adventures in Shadow Diving, because for me, the work I need to come into more balance with was looking at my darkness. For some people who might have more of a negative voice talking to them all the time, your assignment might be more about shining the light and seeing your beauty and your perfection. But inquiry, examination, and being curious about yourself is really critical to this process of reflection. Removing those external distractions is what helps force our gaze inward. Most of us don't know who we truly are because we refuse to look inside. We spend a whole lot of time distracting ourselves from ever really doing this deep internal work. But periods of isolation help us become more familiar with our patterns of thinking and our triggers, including how we respond to provocation and what matters most to us if we're going to pay attention to that. Why would we want to pay attention? Well, because we give away our power when we decide to just react to a stimulus. Our power resides in the pause between stimulus and response. When somebody says something we don't like, we don't have to have an immediate reaction to it. We can think about it, let it come in, sit with it. When we take mindful action and we observe what our response is, we tend to act more skillfully and not make decisions that we regret later. This is an opportunity in isolation, if we really want to watch ourselves and do this work, to pay attention, to notice what we're noticing. Our inner voice and guidance, that deep spirit within us that wants to speak to us all the time, that DNA from our ancestors, is very much a subtle energy, but it's nudging us all the time. And when we start to notice things, when we really start paying attention, all the lessons are right there ready to unfold for us. I'd like to remind you that there's no greater strength of character than a willingness to honestly review our shadow selves. And I do that very honestly in this piece. Happy to talk about that in the Q&A part. When we shine a light in these dark places, that's where we allow transformation to come in. And again, I want to remind, on the opposite side, if you're someone who needs instead to look at your beauty and your strength and your perfection, shine that light in you to find your light. This is a unique and special global moment that we're in. And I'm not at all diminishing the challenging times that we are in, the frustrating situation that many people are finding themselves in, particularly those with less privilege than me, economically, with their health, with their family's health, with the struggle to spend time alone. Whatever your anxiety might be in this moment, I am by no way minimizing this. But in creating this resilient, soulful leadership that we're looking for, part of that comes from taking that first step towards seeing this as an opportunity right now, if you are otherwise well and not facing those challenges. Crisis and trauma have birthed many awakenings. I encourage you to rise up to this challenge to put radical love in action. If we all become more intimate with the spirit that animates us, we'll have an opportunity to see social distancing and isolation and quarantines not as a prison sentence, but rather an opportunity, because we can't change it right now. This is the situation we find ourselves in. Buddhism teaches the mindfulness of just being aware of, this is what this feels like. This is what this moment is, without having aversion to it, without clinging to the things we like or wanting to get rid of the things we don't like, just developing the skills of mindful observation and awareness. And when we do that, we're accepting an opportunity to go within, to find our deepest truths, our greatest fears, and our unopened gifts. The world needs us to heal ourselves right now. This is Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who I quoted earlier, and I also wanted to bring her in here because she reminds us that love and justice are not two. Without interchange, there cannot be outer change. Without collective change, no change matters. This is why this is at the root of creating any of the social change movements that we want to create in policy, in our activism, in this world we want to create together. It all truly does start within. So be willing to do your reflection work. However, also be willing to take care of yourself. Renewal is the second piece of this important work we are undertaking while we're in isolation. Self-care is not an indulgence. I can't tell you how many times I have worked on repatterning, giving myself permission to get good sleep. I, for too many years in my legislative and political career, was on the hamster wheel of attending every event that I was expected to be at and still trying to find time with my family. And that would get cut down into, well, I'll just sleep less. That didn't work so great for my body. When I'm in Peru and nothing else to distract me, I regularly get between 9 and 12 hours of sleep a night. And every time I finish one of my retreats, whether it's one of the 10-day retreats or this recent 30-day one, I've never felt better because I've given myself permission to get the rest my body needs to take care of itself. Exercise, moving that energy is critically important. And bonus points if you're able to do that in nature. Nature walks and connecting with the wisdom of nature that's speaking around us all the time is really important. Yoga and meditation and journaling, another way to support this inner work that we are working to do. Food, really nutritious foods, what we feed our body. Our bodies are wise. They want to take care of us. They know how to take care of us and not be in dis-ease when we give it the basic building blocks it needs to be healthy and well. And what an opportunity. We're all home now, not running around at restaurants, not making every meal a social occasion. We can cook and we can be more mindful about what we are cooking and eating. I have people ask me sometimes about self-care practices saying, well, I don't have time to meditate. I have a busy job or I'm homeschooling my kids now. I get that. Let's not think of meditation as just when we're sitting on a mat in an Om position with our eyes closed. That kind of meditation is preparing us to be more mindful in our waking state. But there are ways we can incorporate meditation into our everyday activities. Eating more mindfully is one of them. Most often we race through and eat our food while reading a book, looking at social media, driving in a car with fast food. When we're removing mindfulness from eating, we're stripping away our relationship to the consciousness of our food and the wisdom of that food that is coming in to nourish our bodies. Drinking lots of water is self-care. The highest vibration imaginable is in our water. And when we drink water, as long as it's not fracked, right? When we drink water, it is a vibrational source that lifts us as well. Our body needs water. Water is life. Hydrate regularly. And don't forget to play. play, play, play. That has been a really important thing for me. I have coloring books and cards and puzzles on this slide. Play in whatever way play speaks to you. But our life as children really showed us the wisdom that pointed towards being willing to just let go and play. And then there's some things that are helpful for us to try to avoid during these times, because when we're feeling more stress and anxiety, especially if being isolated and in quarantine is uncomfortable for you, you might seek to self-soothe through things that can be addictive and really strip your energy. Social media is something that is really great for keeping us all connected in these times, and we can overindulge. Mindless scrolling through screens really just zaps us of our energy and disconnects us from who we are and that inner voice that's trying to speak and engage with us all the time. So I suggest going on a diet of social media. Be more mindful about when you do log in and when you will check your messages. Don't have it be something that is your constant thing that you're looking at. The same goes for TV. If you can, turn it off altogether. Television is at its best when it's appointment television and you're going in specifically to do something to nourish yourself for a little while and give yourself a break from other work that you're doing. But to mindlessly have the television on in the background, especially on chattering cable news that's only putting mostly negative images and emotions out into the airwaves, why would you invite that into your space all the time? The same goes for processed foods and sugars, sugary drinks, fast food, recreational marijuana, and alcohol. All of these things on this page really should be done in moderation. And in these times, we have to be especially mindful that we are not overindulging, because this will strip away our ability to be more resilient, as I'll talk in a moment. Now we'll go on to rebirth. Once we've done this inner work and gotten really more familiar with who we are, what makes us tick, what we've been avoiding, we have an opportunity to build a new world together. I'm reminded right now of a couple things I left out that I wanted to say in the reflection section. Part of what creates this opportunity for rebirth, for a new us and a new world, when we go in to get more familiar with the parts of ourselves that we've been rejecting, is that we come into a bigger sense of wholeness. We live in a culture that for too long has reinforced this notion that you must be good and that there are things about you that are bad and that you only want to show your best face to the world, and that the bad things that might be a part of you, you should hide, deny, reject. What happens when we do that is that we're rejecting a part of who we are. Our darkness is here to teach us things. It doesn't mean that we have to act out on our darkness or indulge it, but we don't have to reject it either. We can look at it. We can become friends with it. We can invite it back to the table, because that is where our wholeness of being is. Our teachers are the good things about us and the bad things about us, without having judgment on any of it. It's just light and dark, and they both come together to give us a sense of wholeness. When we're not in alignment with that, we act unskillfully, and that is what creates the so many of the ills of the world. So much of the suffering, it comes from a place of us not being in our whole selves. So once we've come together to become more whole through that inner journey, and support ourselves more fully by giving ourselves the renewal and self-care that we need and detoxing from things that strip our energies away, this is where we start having an opportunity to see, this is how I'm becoming anew, and this is how I want to create a new world. What we say and think matters. They are our tools of creation. carrying energy and meaning to shape our perception of reality. We're really great storytellers. We have, some of us, a constant story running through our mind all day long. And we tell ourselves that we look fat in these jeans, but then 30 minutes later, someone compliments us about being smoking hot. Or we tell ourselves that our boss must be mad at us and angry when they asked for us to come into the office and have a sit-down meeting, when ultimately we sit down and find out that they're wanting to praise us for a job well done. We have these stories that create emotions and concepts around us all the time. And one of them, the biggest story that we've all been creating together, is a story of what is our collective reality. And for a very long time, we've all agreed that reality was one way. And now what we're finding in this post-pandemic scenario through coronavirus is actually it can be something entirely different. And that we actually get to choose what kind of stories we tell, what kind of ways that we live, how we interact with each other, and what kind of reality we want to make our world up to be. The way humans have been living and interacting in the world up till now is unsustainable. We need a new perspective. Mother Earth is putting humanity in a timeout. This collective pause is a chance for us to look at ourselves and our habits and our way of being. And as systems and structures that no longer serve us start to collapse, this is where we can dream a bigger dream. The bigger dream is one of collection, collectivity, connection, unity consciousness, the opportunity to rebuild something anew together. We, for too long in this country, have been steeped in toxic individuality. And it's a legacy of colonization and our annihilation of tribal cultures. We see evidence of it everywhere around us. We are in a capitalist economy that promotes scarcity and hoards supplies, and this constant feeling that you're empty unless you're out buying something. In the general discarding of our elderly, rather than holding them in a place of sacred honor. In policies that have failed to assure access to basic needs for everyone, like healthcare and sick leave, living wages. Think how many employees who were called service employees prior to this, who now are, we understand finally, are essential, but are barely making the wages they need to take care of their families. This can change. In the politics that divide us and appeal to our basest instincts rather than to our highest ideals, we don't have to be that way. In an unwillingness to change our behaviors to lessen the threat of climate change, I think we're all starting to get more connected to Mother Nature in this climate. And in the domination of white supremacy structures that most refuse to see, let alone name, we can let all of this crumble. It's up to us right now. What are we wanting to build? We can instead dedicate ourselves to bringing forth strong, resilient, inclusive communities of mutual connection and benefits. In this moment of crisis, we are pregnant with possibility. Do you feel it? We are pregnant with possibility. In the midst of this chaos is created a new way. There's no other time in the history of this world where an entire global community has experienced such a collective calling to work in collaboration for the survival of our species. We can harness this energy of solidarity to bring about a great change as we recover and rebuild. As we step into this work to remake ourselves, we find a deeper connection to the unity consciousness that allows us to understand this notion that there is no us and them, and that we are all one. Which brings us to resilience. We have to cultivate this resilience in ourselves in order to create more resilient communities. Resilience is the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of stress, challenge, or adversity. The greater your capacity and your resilience, the more energy you have available. Think of your resilience as your inner battery and whether or not it is charged. And what we're going to talk about in the last moments of my presentation before opening it up to questions and answers is this sense of the inner battery being drained can be drained from 4 different areas. And I'm sharing with you here a chart from the HeartMath Institute. I am about halfway through an 8-week course on getting certification from the HeartMath Institute on training people to build more personal resilience. And I'm going to give you a couple of techniques from this training today. On this chart, what we see is that in the 4 domains of resilience, some of our resilience comes from our physical self. Our endurance and our strength helps create resilience. Our flexibility in our spiritual life, our commitment to values, the tolerance of others' values and beliefs helps create more resilience. Mental flexibility, our attention span, our ability to focus and incorporate multiple points of view adds to our resilience. But the one that drains our battery more than any other is the emotional resilience. And self-regulation is really all of what we just spoke about in what I call what word did I use? What R word did I use to go inward first? The initial reflection. Our self-regulation comes from that place of reflection and going inward and being able to stop ourselves before we just have an automatic response to something. And in the draining of that emotional resilience really throws off all the other domains of resilience. But when we are bringing them all together, when that battery is full, you'll notice in the middle of this chart, there's coherence. And coherence is when everything physically in your body's systems, with your heart and your breathing and your energies are all aligned that help bring about your best self. So I'm going to give you 2 quick tips on how to bring about coherence. The first is to do what is called heart-focused breathing. If everyone could just take a moment to focus your attention in the area of the heart. If you want to close your eyes, you can, but it's not even recommended because we're looking to develop these techniques to be able to put them to use, not just when we're home alone, but when we're out and about in our day, when someone cuts us off when we're driving in our car, or when we're at the grocery store and we start to have a panic attack about something. The opportunity to slow down and have heart-focused breathing is going to be the first thing to help bring all those spheres and those domains of resilience into balance. So, focus your attention in the area of the heart. And imagine your breath flowing in and out of your heart or chest, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual, finding an easy rhythm that is comfortable. Because breathing is something we do without having to think about it, when we do bring our attention there and we bring it to that heart area and we slow it down, it helps bring our body into more coherence. So, as you're continuing to do your heart-focused breathing, make a sincere attempt to experience what we call a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. It could be a spouse, a child, a best friend, a pet, anything that makes you feel deeply, genuinely appreciative or connected to gratitude. If you spend a moment doing the heart-focused breathing and adding into that a sincere attempt to experience this regenerative feeling of appreciation. Those combined in just that little bit of time alone can bring you into a coherent alignment. Coherence is something we go in and out of all the time. It can be a minute by minute thing, but the more we are practiced at using some little cheat techniques like these, the more often that we are able to notice the different feeling between being in coherence and not, and making that more of a regular pattern of being, and increasing your resilience to be stronger and building that capacity. And finally, to close, in reciprocity, we are in this together. Reciprocity, I think, is one of the most beautiful ways in which we are engaged on this planet. It's such a reciprocal relationship. Our relationship to Mother Earth, our relationship to how we get our air and water and food, but our reciprocal relationship to each other is something that we've also forgotten. While we might feel lonely in isolation, we have to remember that none of us are facing this alone, that the entire planet is of one mind right now. Feel the strength and possibilities in that sacred connection to each other. And pledge to be a positive contributor to this human and planetary chain. As we go inward to make ourselves more whole, we create a force for healing that extends to all with whom we are in reciprocal relationship. And I close with a reading from a poem, if you will, something I wrote last week for Earth Day that is short in nature, but comes from a genuine connection to the reciprocal relationship that we have to Mother Earth.
Mother Earth, how would the world be different if we radically loved you? Ask instead, my child, how would the world be different if you knew my radical love for you? Say that again. Our relationship is alive and dynamic, but you have forgotten. For just one day, allow your hearts to fill with the immense reservoir of love I have for all of humanity. Remember the wisdom I blew into your heart at your very first breath. It's your separation from my unconditional love that causes you to act in unskillful ways against me. But how can you love us? We have caused you so much harm. This is what radical love is, and I am your primary teacher. I love you so much that I co-created you. There is nothing you can do to be unworthy of my love. I see the goodness of your hearts, and I know that you're afraid. And in your fear, you make unwise choices. Let me lead you back to love. How will you do that? I remind you each and every day how precious you are to me if you have the courage to awaken. When your lungs breathe in the oxygen of the trees, I am inside you, sharing my essence. Preserve it. When you swallow refreshing water, it is my life force that animates and sustains you. Protect it. When you eat delicious foods, it is the gift of my abundance dancing within you. Share it. You have forgotten that these are gifts for you. Don't defend these on my behalf alone. Love yourself enough not to destroy your own home. We are in communion together. This is unity consciousness. Gentle Mother, thank you. Thank you for your patience with our mistakes, for your faith in humanity, for your profound guiding wisdom beauty, and majesty. Grant that we might see ourselves with the same loving grace that you wash upon us with each beat of our heart. And together, may we step into the profound possibilities that unfold when radical love is given and received. Thank you, and may every day be Earth Day.
And I encourage us to stay in touch. This is our web address. I have 2 full seasons. We are now in our 3rd season of podcasts that are able to help support you on this journey. You can find the podcast on any of the podcast applications that are out there. And on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we have a YouTube channel as well. I really look forward to us staying in touch beyond just today's connection, because we are all in this together, and I'm here to support you, and we're building community together. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions and open the dialogue up. You're mute. Can't hear you.
Okay, so I didn't say anything yet. I was just working on the screen here. But if someone else wants to jump in, we invite questions and conversation with Heather. Again, you can kind of just put yourself out there by unmuting. You can also raise your hand, and we can kind of indicate who's going to talk first and second. And we also have our chat option.
Yeah, in the chat function, if you want to type a question or even let us know that you're ready to ask a question, you can enter there.
Well, I guess I'll begin. I do want to say thank you very much for your presentation and everything. I thought this was like perfect timing, because I've been spending this time in isolation, actually just in that whole spiritual journey and everything, and really coming to a lot of these conclusions that you actually brought up in this presentation. So it was really nice and really reaffirming, and yeah, definitely geared towards the way I kind of want to go forward and everything. I did have one question to just start off. While you were in Peru, why didn't you go outside during your time there? And do you think that could have aided in kind of that? I know it was you wanted to have that separation between external and internal, but do you think maybe the next time it might, I don't know, aid in that whole situation? However you feel about it, though.
That's a really great question, London, because by no stretch am I encouraging people as they're doing the reflection work to not go outside. I think we need more outside time. That connecting to nature itself is part of the wisdom journey, is part of the package to this. For me in particular, during this period of time, it was about creating a really super strict container. I was doing the most extreme of everything, and that included this sense of really being stationary in that 8x10 room as a way to not escape. Because if I were to have left and spent some time out in the jungle, I love animals, I love plants. I would sit there and I would observe I would be doing helpful observations. I'd be watching how the ants are interacting with each other, and I'd be connecting to everything out there, and I'd be learning important things, but I would be sort of distracting myself from looking inward by being connected to what everything else around me was doing out there. In just the confines of my room, I really spent much more time going more deeply within to look at the things that I maybe don't pay so much attention to when I'm at home. However, I think all of this is about baby steps. And You got to do what pieces of it support you to go inward more deeply. And for some, it's going to be being outside, being connected to nature, being using that as a part of your journey.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, and I totally agree. It's a person by person basis and moment by moment basis. So yeah, everyone knows what's best for them at any given time. So thank you.
Yeah. And congratulations on willingly taking on your own journey during this time. You have a choice. You don't have to do this work. You could decide that you're going to indulge on that slide of things that I say are the detox things. You could say, you know, wow, my way of dealing with this is going to be to jump in there, but you didn't. You said, okay, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to make myself stronger and have this be a learning opportunity. And I can't wait to hear what your reflections are from this journey when you get on the other side of it. This is going to be a really amazing period of time in your life. You're going to look back on this when you're our age and say, wow, what foundational support I gave myself during that moment of quarantine.
And that's exactly what I'm looking forward to. Just like the other side, also like when the world when the world reopens back up, and you know, just trying to go into the other side with a better mindset, and just like you said, emphasis on better resilience to adversity and things that we have no control over, but we do have the most control over ourselves. So really just put in a lot of the energy that we are wasting on worrying about external things, and like revitalizing that into like an internal process that can work in our favor. So yeah, I think Mr. Mandicott has a question on the group chat though as well.
Bill, do you want to read your question, or do you want me to just read it for you?
Oh, I could read it. Took the opportunity of thinking while we're listening at the same time. So I really struggle with how to teach the concepts of resiliency to our students. You know, we try to model the way, I think, as I don't want to use the word as leader, but as someone who shares that space with our students. And I think we try to model the way. I think we provide both academic and co-curricular experiences. I think we really put forth the effort, and I just seem to see how they struggle with being able to practice that resiliency in the way we hope they would. So help, how do we dig deeper?
Well, it is like everything, something that we all have to choose for ourselves. It's something that we have to select and say that we love ourselves enough that we want to give ourselves the utmost energetic support possible to be our strongest, best selves. And that and in so choosing, you know, a lot of the things that are in line with how you build resiliency sort of seem sometimes out of line with what is the typical college student's lifestyle, right? Get more sleep. Oh my God, how am I going to get more sleep and juggle my classes and my social life? All those things on the slide that I was suggesting that we detox from is kind of like a slide of your 4 years of college for some people. And so getting to the place of having the conversation about what's on the other side when we make these choices, I think can probably best come from peer-to-peer engagement and having people like London speak to her classmates and peer-to-peer about how making different choices is creating a different impact in her life. Not to put you on the spot, London, but I think that peer-to-peer engagement, if you are able to find the cohort of students who have chosen to make these wise shifts and it doesn't have to be extreme. That's like, I want to keep coming back to, my extreme example isn't meant to say you have to be that extreme. It's a contrast to teach. It's that you can go this extreme, and there's a whole lot between the extreme of what I was doing in Peru and what is good practice. And so on that slide of things to detox from, it's not that you have to be abstinent on everything on that chart, but understanding that every time you take of something from the detox chart, you're draining your inner battery. You're pulling some juice away from your resilience. And every time you do something that's on the self-care chart that's energy renewing, you're juicing that battery up. And so just make wise choices. If you know that you're planning to have a few more of these indulgences on a particular weekend, then spend more time during the week juicing your battery up with more exercise, with better sleep, with some meditation and journal. It's all balance. Everything in life is about a balance. And helping students to navigate getting those proper balances in their life to get their inner batteries recharged is going to also help them perform better in school. And so I think that peer-to-peer engagement, the understanding of balance, that there's no 100%, you can only do these things and not these things. This is about feeling into and gaining agency over the choices that we make, and understanding that we have to engage our mindfulness when we make these choices.
Thank you. I think about when growing up in the late 60s and the 70s, and I thought, we had some challenging times, but I don't know what our young people and what our Gen Z students, what they're asked to navigate and what the challenges that they're facing are. It's just incredible. And I have to remind myself what it must be like in this generation to experience life as it is today.
Yes, it's important to be mindful of that. And I like to know that I believe that these younger generations were born into this moment. They are star beings. They came with a certain fire and pizzazz and connection to consciousness that our generation and those above us didn't have. We had to work harder to attain. And so in some ways, they're having to, don't look at what they're navigating with the assumption that they are navigating it with the same toolbox that you and I had, that we had to spend a whole life developing. I think they came here with more tools. Their consciousness that has pushed us on the gun issue with the Parkland students and the Me Too movement and all of the amazing skills and talents that this generation has brought to the table, I think they're here to help us navigate this. Now we're all here to help each other, but don't look beyond the opportunity for the students themselves when they're reminded. And that may be the other piece of this for you on the college campus, is to remind them of their own power in this moment, that they were born into this moment to show their resilient leadership, to teach us how to get through these times, and to ask for their advice on how to do it. Maybe what's numbing them out is that they're annoyed with us thinking all the time we have to give them our advice, and instead asking their advice on how to navigate this crisis.
The student becomes the teacher today.
Always.
Thank you for that perspective.
All right, Judy Carbone, do you want to unmute her?
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Judy.
The last time I saw you was at FSU in your Wonder Woman program, and that was amazing for me. And that was part of my story, what propelled me to put myself out there and run for office. And that idea of external action, I think I've been just feeling so pressed by. We gotta take external action. What I love about your program today was it's about internal action. And And this idea of Mother Earth putting us kind of in timeout right now, we need it. We really do need it. That said, I can't help but think there are these external pressures that are making that external action more important today than ever. And I feel so pushed by them, sometimes too pushed, particularly with the election coming up and being such an important election, with climate change, with so much. How do you find that balance? To be good leaders, you have to have that resilience and that renewal. But you do have to continually put yourself out there and push and push. How do you reconcile that, particularly when there's an external deadline?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, and thank you for running for office. You are an amazing candidate, and you have so many gifts to contribute to the community.
Oh,
and
thank you, Heather.
for doing it. So I come back to, it is job number one always, and I learned this too late, in that I learned this in my journeys after I got out of public office, that really this internal work needs to drive the external work. That when we are doing this internal work is when we gain the insight and clarity that influences our ideas, our decisions, and how we interact and how we do the external work. And so without the internal wisdom guiding us, we're kind of just left mindlessly, but from a place, in a good spot in our heart where we care and we want to make a difference and we want to be engaged and involved, and we see that there are problems and we want to try to shift them. But when we're constantly just running on that external hamster wheel, what it is that we have to contribute to solving those things isn't going to be as profound as the wisdom that comes from setting aside this internal work and the renewal piece and the support of our body with healthy choices. It's all one system. And when we support our system to be in balance and we're giving ourselves that radical love, that's also what is meant by this radical love notion. Radical love means giving yourself really super healthy foods and getting that good sleep and looking at yourself honestly and courageously, and then learning from that. And all of those things, when we do them, brings so much wisdom and clarity and compassion, that when we start doing that for ourselves, it amplifies our ability to then put that out into the world. My capacity for loving everyone else and having compassion for everyone else's experience is born from the deep self-love and self-compassion that I cultivated by doing these internal exercises. Let's also remember that the whole external world is a reflection of our collective inside. If you don't like having Donald Trump as president right now, work on yourself, because right now he is a reflection of who we are collectively in this country. All of our elected leaders are. They are reflections of who we are. So if we don't like what looks like on the outside, we go in to work on the inside, because as the inside changes, the outside magically starts to shift as well.
Heather, you have a couple people that are waiting. I think Seth is next.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Seth. I'm in Dr. Reminsky's conflict management class. Thank you for your discussion and those points. I really appreciated how you brought all that. And I just wanted to respectfully and humbly offer just a different point of view, just for the sake of discussion. And coming from the point of view as a Christian, a lot of what you said reminded me of many of the things that I believe and that I value in this life. And then you made a few points of like seeking goodness and justice and finding inner healing, seeing our beauty, and especially the point of being a child and and playing. Those are all points that, to a certain extent, I would say a lot of the same things in Christianity, but where I think I'm struggling to see how this could all come to be is that searching within, from a Christian worldview, isn't going to give us these answers to these questions, or it's not going to help us to see them more clearly. In fact, I think it would do the opposite. Looking within, we would see all of our failures and all of our all the bad that we don't really want to see. And then Christianity and the Bible tells us looking without, looking to God, who you spoke of Mother Earth a lot. And especially at your prayer to sort of Mother Earth at the end, that sounds like exactly like a prayer that I would pray to God. And I think that was sort of funny there. But anyway, looking without to a higher power, I think is where we are able to see those good things we want to see the goodness and justice, and find the healing and seeing our beauty. And I would say that's only able to be or accomplished through the work of Jesus, who shows us who we are. And God loves us radically. Like you were praying at the end, he loves us radically. And that's seen in the person of Jesus Christ, who died to take all of our bad and sin and shame and all of the stuff we don't want upon himself. And he gave us true beauty. He gave us the ability to seek goodness and justice. And he also says, this is the thing I like the most, he says, if you're not like a child, you will not inherit the kingdom of God. And to the point where you were speaking of being like a child. So I would sort of humbly push back and suggest that sort of looking looking to a higher power, that being God and Jesus, who's the image of God, would be how we accomplish all these things. But like I said, humbly and with respect, because I really appreciated everything you said.
Yeah, I take it that way. Thank you, Seth. I'm going to answer very directly the point you're raising, but I want to do it with an asterisk first, okay? And that is to clarify that our Soul Force Politics work isn't about any one particular religion. We honor and celebrate the faith and wisdom traditions of all faiths, whether it's Buddha or Allah or Native American Great Spirit, across the board, Yahweh, Judaism, every single wisdom tradition, all faiths are born within that same spirit. And we're not even talking about, when I'm talking about spirit, the spirit that is within us and animates us, it's not even about a religion at all. So even people who are agnostic or atheist are welcome at the table of Soul Force Politics. In the specific point that you raised, though, I'm going to answer it to you from one Christian to another. Because Christ is, number one, the teacher, as you mentioned. There's radical love there. Christ consciousness is about that. But I think it's possible, I would encourage you to think more broadly about what we have been taught in Christianity. And that is that you are divine, that God is within you, that it's not an external thing. Yes, there is an external God, but God is inside of you. You are of God's creation. And Christ didn't come to teach us how to just give our darkness over to him and pretend like it's not there and not go inside because we don't want to look at the things about us that might be those challenging things. As a matter of fact, who'd he spend his time with, right? The lepers, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, reminding us not to reject those things, reminding us that all of who we are is divine. There's a saying that I'm going to paraphrase from a spiritual author that reminds us that our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. We ask ourselves, who am I to be talented and gorgeous, fabulous and amazing? Well, actually, who are you not to be? You were born to make manifest the glory of God that is inside of you. And when you allow that light to shine, you unconsciously give permission to everyone else to do the same. Too often in churches, I think it's gotten twisted and turned around to say that you have to reject a certain piece of yourself, and that you need this external thing to help you do that. When really the true message of that radical love of Christ is about loving all of who you are. I can look at my dark parts and love that part of me that can be selfish, and love that part of me that is has scarcity energy and worries about whether or not I have enough so I can't share, or whatever that piece might be. I can look at her and love her, knowing that she is also divine, but she is confused or scared or disconnected from her heart in that moment. And in so doing, I can even look squarely at what that scarcity energy is wanting to teach me, and allow that to help inform how I make different choices. Looking at our darkness doesn't mean we serve it. It means we're aware of it. We have lots of examples in leadership at the highest levels right now of what it looks like to have darkness be unchecked, to be acting out on it in unskillful ways. Going inside and looking at who we are fully just gives us more connection to our full essence of being, so that we're smarter about making choices that don't serve that darkness. When we reject it and deny it, it's still there. And that's when we start acting out unskillfully and do things that don't serve the light. And, you know, I thought myself in the prayer to Mother Earth that it just as easily, the entire thing could have been a conversation between me and Christ. The thing is, that's part of unity consciousness. It's all the same thing. Christ, Earth, Buddha, Allah, all of us, you, me, we all have that divine spark within us.
Thank you for that response. That was helpful. I won't respond to that just because I want other people the opportunity to discuss as well, but thank you.
You're welcome, Seth.
But I would say I would encourage you to reach out to Heather as she offered. She has her contact information in her presentation, and I'll be happy to share that. But you have the links, you know, to the website, because I think that's part of what the leadership residency experience is encouraging us to do, is, you know, to build these relationships and have these conversations to learn together about leadership. We are going to try to wrap up around 2. So we did have one more question from Sherry, and then we'll move towards closing. If we have time, maybe one more, but let's hear from Sherry next.
My dog has just decided to bark at the very moment that we're doing that. But first of all, Heather, that you have just put together and connected the dots for me with my Christian faith as a Quaker, my politics, and also my focus on wellness and health. So just beautifully in your response, particularly just a minute ago. I met you, you didn't meet me, but I saw you, took my students to Annapolis a couple of, well, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago when you spoke, and they were there for Advocacy Day, and they were enamored of you and your practical but visionary politics, as I was. So thank you for that, and I hope you return to politics someday. But what I wanted to comment on, aside from how you connected all those dots, was the timing of hearing you today. We were funded in our community for a community resilience project using the Center for Mind-Body Medicine model, which takes self-awareness, self-care, and group support to bring people together in compassionate and safe places. We finished up on the 15th of March, minutes before the governor closed everything down, probably as you were coming out of your your retreat. And because it was an intensive 8-day training of 150 people with our goal to bring this, what you're talking about, and to connect it with spirituality, but not any particular faith, bring that into our community. And very much we see our Christian community being a part of this. Your explanation of what you just said really helps me in answering how it all fits together.
Great.
Self-care with politics, with spirituality. So perfect timing to be listening to you today, as we're just about ready to launch groups in the community. Now we have to do them online, but which will bring people together. Alicia's trained with us, and we'll be offering a mind-body skill group, but a way to bring people together even though we're isolated, to build resilience, inner reflection, and self-care. So thank you for perfect timing. Thank you.
You're welcome. And please, as you're continuing to do that community work, point people to Soulful Politics as a resource. Follow us online and on social media, listen to the podcasts, and invite me to collaborate. One of the things I love so much about my relationship with FSU is we had a really great event, and then it's like, okay, let's not stop there. Let's keep doing more things. And every engagement is built on the beauty of the one before it. And I would love to continue to be involved with as many of the communities that want this work as possible. I'm probably going to offer repeating something like this to the larger force politics community. And so get on our email list and sign up for other webinars and offerings. I do this work 100% volunteer, not paid salary. This is all just my desire to help connect those dots for other people, because they got all connected for me, and I got really excited about it in this journey and decided, oh, I see how all this comes together. I want to help others see all this come together, because the world that I was wanting to create when I was in politics was always missing something. And it was the piece that it was missing was other people becoming empowered in their best selves in order to help create this shift. And once I realized that all of these pieces needed to be together for this world to get created, that's when I started, okay, I got to do this soul force politics thing. And for the last 3 years, it's been slow going, because people are like, I don't know that I totally get what you're talking about. Well, now I'm in this moment where people recognize I need some help navigating what's going on. Oh, I'm starting to see how building some of these skills can help me. And then as I'm helping to connect the dots for more people, we're creating this larger social justice movement that really excites me. And so through you and your students, and thank you to everyone who is on the call today for creating this chance at connection and going in to create our best selves for creating a new world that we want to create together.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Heather, and for everyone who's here. I know our numbers are dwindling because we've got some people that are moving on to other events in their day, including our students that'll go on to their next class in some cases. But I wanted to say I definitely appreciate the framework and listening to the soothing way that you bring us together when you move through, what you share. I think that's a big asset, because we need to be able to, be open to that listening. And I think part of that is, you invite the resilience by the openness that you have. I mean, I think that's the takeaway. I would kind of follow up on Bill's question about how we reach our students. I get older, I wonder more and more, how does that work? And, you can see from students who are involved today that they make it easy in so many ways, because when they're eager to learn, they come and they teach us things. And that flexibility that you mentioned, I think, is really at the heart of this, that we have to stay flexible to learning, to being open to others' perspectives. I think that's one of the things that our nation's struggling with the most right now, is that flexibility of, being spiritually or mentally or emotionally open even. And hopefully, again, those are leadership competencies, right? We need to strengthen those things to do the everyday work, the justice work, the governance work too. So thanks for teaching us something about all of those things.
You're so welcome. And that calmness comes from my place of coherence and putting all of these practices into place on a regular basis. I tend to live in that sphere of constant coherence, and I can't even describe the shift that it has made for me in as I mentioned earlier in one of the Q&As, in bringing forth that clarity that impacts everything else. And so I teach these things because I live by them, and they've made such a difference in my life, and I hope that they help improve yours as well. And I'm just sending a big hug from my heart to all of yours during these challenging times. I know that this is not easy, and yet it's also beautiful. It's really a beautiful, beautiful moment that we are in, and we can make it something incredible together.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our sponsors and everyone again for participating today. We'll see you again. Remember,